And welcome back, everyone. This is our third webinar, but this time it's actually recorded. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties and we just weren't able to get it working. So we thought we would do the same webinar and then post it on YouTube and you guys can all watch it. So a little bit about us. We're the Patel Wealth Management Group. We work through National Bank Financial, and we actually started in 1981 by my father's ship. Obviously, wealth management's gone a very long way since 1981. Started as a stockbroker, moved into fee-based advice and investment management, and now today we're full-on wealth management, working with partners everywhere. So if it has a dollar sign, we can do it. So a little bit about myself, Sheen Patel here. I'm the Associate Investment Advisor of the Patel Wealth Management Group, and I've been doing this since about 2014. And my role on the team is essentially to kind of delegate all of the wealth management aspects of our business. So today, I'm proud to introduce Craig Plumley of Sun Life Investments, and I'm going to turn it over to Craig here to introduce himself.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate your time, appreciate the ability to connect with you and your valued clients. Just wanted to, I'm the Director of Wealth Sales at Sun Life Global Investments, so I represent anything investment related at Sun Life, that being mutual funds, segregated funds, annuities, GICs, so anything under the investment umbrella at Sun Life. And so my job as the Director of Wealth Sales is to work with financial planners in the Golden Horseshoe area. And so working on various strategies, including estate planning, income planning, investment related strategies, that sort of thing. And so as you know, we've been working with your team for several years now, and it's been, of course, a pleasure working with you, and happy to join you today to talk about some good strategies for your clients.
Thanks, Craig. We've done this advanced retirement income planning seminar in person before. Everyone really liked it, and I thought, what better way to actually take this and turn it into a digital format. So I guess without further ado, let's just jump into it. So today we're going to talk about, again, advanced retirement income planning. So Craig, first question, what is this advanced retirement income planning? What is it?
Well, first and foremost, it's what we're going to talk about today is not so advanced that people certainly won't understand it, but it is talking about income planning. And I think in the industry as a whole, there's a real lack of understanding of what that means. And frankly, even with the advice community, there's not necessarily a large focus with financial advisors on the idea of income planning. And so it's certainly good to be able to speak today a little bit more about what specifically we mean by that versus, for example, retirement planning. So income planning is really a focus on when you actually start withdrawing money from your account, when you're actually deaccumulating, when you start to draw that income down. And so there's a lot of different components to that. It's actually a little bit more complicated than the actual retirement planning process, just in the sense that you think about when you're, accumulating money, you're going from one paycheck to now suddenly having maybe 6, 7, 8 different sources of income. So, where you take that money from, how much from each, how you do it in a way to maximize your government benefits and minimize your taxes. That's really the objective there, is to ensure that you have a sustainable level of income so you don't run out, and to make sure that you're maximizing how you take that money out. So it is a new stage, obviously, where you're going from saving to now deaccumulating. It's a very different stage in your life. And so if you think about what that looks like from the beginning of your retirement to the point where you're now looking at your legacy, you're going to go through various different periods of your life where those income needs are going to change. So for example, in the early years, it might be that you're going to be doing some more traveling. You're going to be looking at things like your lifestyle and growth needs. And so, if you're, the kind of discretionary spending that you're going to be doing is quite large to begin with. Then you have other expenses like your essentials, like food and shelter and that type of thing, which remains fairly consistent over time. But what you'll find is as you get older, those income needs may actually go down, because in the early years, what we call your go-go years, your income needing to be higher. As you kind of go into your slow-go years, that discretionary spending starts to decline, but your healthcare expenses start to go up. And then what we go, your no-go years, of course, you get a much higher income need for health expenses. And then, of course, at the end of it all is whatever your legacy needs are. So it can be quite complicated. It's not a simple prescriptive advice that can go for everyone. Everyone's completely unique, and everyone's got different needs and different ideas of what that retirement looks for and what their vision is. So it really is a part of the planning that needs to be treated separately from strictly just switching from accumulation to deaccumulation.
Thank you for that awesome answer. I totally agree. When you do get to that income stage of your life, it's not just a turn on a switch and just let everything start flowing. I mean, if you can save some money to taxes and all that, that would be great. Right?
Right.
I also love how you come up with this go-go years, slow-go years, and no-go years. And most of you you'll go through this. Obviously, when you're much older, your expenses are way higher. And then when you first retire, you're like, all right, let's travel every couple months. That's kind of, and then your spending changes. So thank you for that. So I guess we talked about income planning and just like kind of what it is about. So let's talk about traditional retirement planning versus retirement income planning. What are the two differences here, and what let's start there.
Absolutely. So retirement planning is, there are some key, there is some overlap there in the sense that, when you're planning for your retirement, you want to have certain ideas of, again, kind of going back to, well, what does that retirement look like? But the real focus during the retirement plan is typically looking at how do we continue to build that accumulation in your savings so that we get to the point where now you have the flexibility to be able to draw that income and feel comfortable that you have enough for the rest of your life and to be able to live the lifestyle that you want. So certainly it is more of a focus on accumulation during the retirement planning stage. And it is the kind of thing that certainly you should be working with an advisor. However, it actually gets quite a bit more complicated going from retirement planning to income planning, because as I mentioned, when you're during your savings period, you might have a couple of different sources of income. You've got, you're just putting money into your account. The risks are different than they are during the income phase. For example, the longer you can invest, as you know, the more your risk goes down in the market, and the more compounding you have to be able to build your savings. However, as soon as you go into the income stage, now how many years you have to live can work against you, in the sense that you have that many more years to be able to pay out income. So longevity, although certainly great for everyone from an income planning standpoint, it's the kind of thing that you really don't know how long you're going to live for. You really don't know what your health is going to look like during the income phase either. So there's two big unknowns there, your longevity and your health. Whereas, for example, those may not be as big of a risk factor when you're saving. As a matter of fact, when you're saving, longevity works for you, and generally for the average person, health isn't necessarily a large concern until you get to that sort of retirement stage. So from that perspective, there is a pretty big difference there. Also, I would say, there's a lot more what we call prescriptive advice for the accumulation period or the retirement planning, in the sense that, everyone is, asked to, put money in their RSPs. Typically in Canada, we see the majority of people tend to do that. Maybe they're using their TFSAs. Maybe they have some money outside of the RSPs. However, for the average person in Canada, they're told to just keep saving, put it in their RSPs, and then when they hit the point where they need to start drawing money, they just reverse it back out again. And unfortunately, it's not that simple. It is actually quite complicated to start looking at how to make sure that, again, you're maximizing those government benefits, minimizing those taxes. So it's not a simple switch over to the income phase. So the retirement planning really is something that everyone ought to be doing, and starting early in order to build up their assets to make sure that they have that flexibility later on. But once you hit that income phase, the plan does change. It cannot be the same plan. So that's why we encourage working with an advisor that understands that difference and can now create an income plan for you that's separate from the retirement plan.
Yeah, no, income planning is a little bit, it goes actually kind of in conjunction with retirement planning, if you will. Right. I mean, you have your financial plan written out. It does kind of address, some of the incomes, but I think to take it one step further, you almost need an income plan on top of that just to
Absolutely.
assets. And at the Patel Wealth Management Group, we're actually really big believers in kind of putting your money everywhere, not just your RSP or your TFSA, diversification, so that when you are retired, you have multiple sources of income. We're huge on that. So you did touch on some of the risks of income planning. Let's say the person now, so say client A wants to, pursue income planning. When, like you say, they're already retired, or maybe they're not retired, when should they actually start planning for their income in this part of their life?
Absolutely. Well, I would say that if, the income stage obviously comes later. So, I mean, the earlier you are in your career and your savings period, you're going to be a little bit more focused, strictly on building up those savings. Perhaps at that time, when you're not in your highest earning years, is perhaps not as important. Where it start to become important is, and for the average person, the 40s and 50s tend to be the highest savings years. And so what happens is once you've gotten to a point where you're now sort of at the peak of your career and your peak earning period, you need to start to look at that point to start looking at, am I investing my money in a very tax efficient way? And that really depends on your marginal tax bracket as well, as you know. So if you have money outside of an RSP, like should you be putting money into an RSP? Well, that kind of depends on your marginal tax bracket as to whether or not it should be in an RSP or a TFSA. If you're in the highest marginal tax bracket, it may make sense to maximize your RSPs. But then as you sort of come up and maybe 5 to 10 years away from retirement, you might look at that and say, well, if I have too much money in my RSPs as the bulk of my retirement, should I be maybe start to draw that down earlier to make sure that I don't bump myself up into a higher marginal tax bracket later? So I would say 5 to 10 years away from retirement is a very good time to starting to be looking seriously at, do we need to start making changes as we start getting closer and closer to those income starting years to make sure that we are invested in the right type of investments that's going to maximize or minimize the taxes, obviously, and make sure that we're not clawing back on our earned government benefits. And so you can start to make those changes, well before you actually hit your retirement date and your income start date. However, it's still possible to make changes obviously after the fact, but I would say 10 to 15 years prior, it's a good idea to start to look at that. But certainly 5 to 10 years, you've got some time to make some changes where you can start to look at, okay, well, what will this look like in terms of my income sources in actual retirement, as opposed to, I'm not going to worry about it until then.
Yeah, no, definitely. You did mention something, clawback. What percentage of Canadians, do you know off by hand how many people get clawback?
It's actually, well, the sad reality is, most people are not in a tax bracket where they do get clawed back in retirement because they haven't saved enough. It's somewhere, I think, between 80 and 90% are not clawed back. And the reason being is they frankly haven't saved enough by retirement to actually worry about the income being high enough to be clawed back in retirement. However, for the Canadians that have done a good job of saving and are in a position where they're fortunate enough to have a high enough income so that they do get clawed back, there are a number of people where, and I've seen many examples of this, where people are starting to take a large number of dividends and that sort of thing, and they're not really paying attention to what's happening in their tax bracket. So for example, a dividend is a tax efficient way of investing, but that gross up on the dividend can mean that they can now be at a higher marginal tax bracket as a result of it. So there's got to be multiple different sources of income to ensure that you're not going to push yourself up too high in your tax bracket later on and then end up being clawed back. So as there's a range of being clawed back, whether it's OAS or CPP. So for example, I can give you a quick number on the threshold for getting clawed back. So currently, and this is as of 2019, so we have something called the, of course, old age securities between 77,000 and 125,000. So as soon as you hit 125,000, you're completely clawed back, but that begins at 77,000. The age amount, that's a credit as well, between 37,000 and 87,000. So
some of these things can get clawed back if you're pushed much beyond that level of income. And so for the average Canadian, that's going to matter. So, what types of income, what types of investment you're invested in will depend on the tax treatment of that, as you know. And so, for example, if you can use things like return of capital, which is your own money coming back to you, that's not taxable. Capital gains is only half taxable. The worst, of course, is interest income. That's going to be fully taxable. And so money that comes out of your RSP is fully taxable as well, so that will bump you up. So that's why it's a good idea to take a look and say, where can I use my least tax efficient assets or income in the lower marginal tax brackets? And as I build my income up, use more flexible and more efficient income sources as I get higher into the higher tiers of the tax brackets.
Yeah, no, and we're fortunate enough because we worked with Greg for a while here, and we're actually doing this retirement income planning for our clients now. And again, the result isn't seen kind of instantaneously. It's usually when you get a nice fat check from the CRA. That's when you see all the benefits of all of this, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
I guess that kind of rolls me into another thing. So we talked about, 5 to 10 years or 15 years before retirement. What if you're already retired? Are you out of luck, or can you start retirement income planning? What do we do here?
Absolutely. So it's never too late. Absolutely. There's changes that you can make because there's going to be going through multiple stages of retirement. Certainly planning for the next few years is still something that, because the income plan actually has to be addressed every single year because things change all the time. Things like divorce, a spouse passing away, kids going off to university, or a new dependent. You never know. There's multiple different ways that things can change for your plan. So it's an ever-changing thing, which is why it's so important to get proper advice behind it, because you will not be able to set a plan and strictly be able to follow it all the way along. Things happen, things change. So yes, the earlier you start to look at it, the more flexibility you have later. However, and it may very well be that you're in a situation where things have been working fine. However, you may see some immediate opportunities to make some changes. For example, it may be that there's certain strategies around some of the market volatility. So as we know, with the pandemic, we saw quite a bit of volatility that was disconcerting for a number of people. In those situations, there's various strategies to handle that kind of market volatility. So that is one of the risks you can help to address by using things like a cash wedge strategy, where you set aside some cash to pull out your income so you don't pull it out of the markets at the wrong time. So market risk is obviously very important, especially in the early years of retirement. We also call that sequence of return risk, because if you have negative years to start in your retirement, it can have an impact on your overall sustainability of your income, and to make sure that your longevity, you're not going to outlive your assets at that point. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we don't know what your health will look like over time. That does change. So that will change in terms of your ability. If you're working part-time during that period of time, you may not be able to work, or the income that you used to be getting from your spouse, that may disappear at some point, right? So OAS and CPP, especially OAS, for example, that disappears with your spouse, right? So these are some of the things that you have to plan for, to say, well, my income may change over time depending on my various circumstances. And so really, there's never too late. At any point, whether you're planning to take out your income or you're already drawing your income, it should be looked at right away to say, again, going back to am I taking out money tax efficiently? Should I be taking out, what sources of income should I be taking my money out of right now in order to make sure I'm not bumping myself up to that next tax bracket? Is there a way that I can start to change my investments from things like, for example, dividends to capital gains or return of capital in order to reduce my tax bracket immediately so that I don't get clawed back on things like OAS and CPP, that sort of thing. So there are immediate changes that you can make. So definitely never too late. Anyone should be looking at their plan on every single year. So that's why we encourage people, the 5 main questions that people ought to be considering are, what are you currently being offered? Are you layering your income correctly? So by layering, I mean, are you taking the right amounts from the right sources to make sure that you're maximizing those benefits and reducing your taxes? Are you making the best use of your government benefits? What strategy do you have for earning income when the markets are down? So as I talked about that cash flow strategy, or making sure that you don't take on too much volatility in the markets. And do you have, as I mentioned, a written financial plan? Something that you can go back to and make changes to on an annual basis.
Yeah, no, I think that's some good advice there. When we do these financial plans, we know that our clients' lives pretty much change every day. You know, there's always something changing. And so when we work with our clients every year at the annual meeting, we actually take a look at that original plan we created and we try to make updates to it, right, along the way. And I think it's really, really important. And obviously, we don't think that everyone's going to know how to take out, you know, the income in the tax efficient manner. This is why you need someone like Craig and myself or Shik on our team to actually like build these income plans, right? Because how are you supposed to figure out how to create an income when the markets are down? And how are you supposed to figure out like the layering of all the income streams? That's not what you went to school for. You are good at whatever you did, and this is what we do, right? So we want to help you as much as possible. I think I'm pretty, like, I think everyone is probably getting the gist of what retirement income planning is. I guess, I mean, what's the risk? What's the risk if you don't have one of these things? And then that'll entice everyone on the call here to actually want to do one of these.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not saying that it's not possible that, you know, your plan, what you're doing right now will work out fine, except that there are some risks. Obviously, the big risk that's overlaying everything else is longevity, right? So that's the amplifier of all other risks. So we really don't know how long you're going to live for. Everyone assumes that they're going to live shorter lives than they think they are. People are actually living much, much longer. And
yeah, actually, funny you say that. When we do our financial planning, we assume that women live to 96 and men live to 94, and that's because there's a 25% chance of probability of live past that age.
Right.
And most people look at us, go, "I'm not living that long."
Yeah, and you make a very good point, because if you have a 1 in 4 chance of living to that age, the question then you have to ask is, what is my tolerance for running out of money? Is it 25%? Is it 50%? If you knew there was a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to run out of money, would you take that risk? I would say the tolerance for people to run out of money is 0. They don't.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, you have to plan. If you see a significant risk, and I'd say 1 in 4 is a pretty high chance that you may live to be that long, especially as a couple, as you know. When you're married and you have a couple, you know, the probability of one of them living to that age is actually 24%. So it is only prudent planning to plan for that long out. The Professional Financial Planning Standards Council does say that you should plan till that age, actually 96. And so that is, from a joint perspective, people being married, the probability is actually quite high. So we absolutely endorse that age as to look at that. The other difficulty is getting a sustainable level of income. You know, typically it used to be, especially when fixed income products like bonds used to be returning much better than they have been. It was a lot easier to generate 5%, 6%. Now they're looking at 4% as being a more sustainable rate, or even now 3%. So because of the volatility in the markets and because of the challenges around the yield you get from fixed income, all of that has to be looked at to say, you know, with those challenges, how do we plan for potentially a longer period in retirement than you did in your working years? And so that is all part of, obviously, the plan, as you mentioned, that needs to be looked at. So that risk of longevity is the key one. You also have inflation as another one, of course, which is rising prices over time. We're all familiar with that, especially here in Canada. You know, certain ones do go up and down, like energy, but ultimately look at food prices and how high they're getting. You know, after 30 years, what might that look like? What might your cost of living look like? It probably will be substantially higher. So you have to consider the inflation. You've got the health risk as well. Will you have a health problem along the way that could be quite expensive? And of course, the market risk as well, making sure that you don't, especially in the early years, making sure that you don't take a big hit in the markets, because it's very hard to recover. You know, we say if you lose 50%, it doesn't take 50% to get back to where you started. It's 100% in the markets to return from a 50% drop. So the more you can preserve that capital and making sure that the money lasts, then that's prudent in terms of the income plan as well.
You hit that right on the head there. 50% drop, 100% of return. It is so true, and people don't realize that.
Absolutely.
So I think we've explained the topic pretty well. I think if anyone wants to learn more about this and needs more information, or like if you're our client and we haven't even done this yet, my number is 905-849-3549. My email is sheehan.patel@nbc.ca, and I will be more than happy to start this process with you. And then, I mean, if you even need to, we can even bring Craig in too, because I'm sure Craig would like to do that.
Pleasure. Happy to help.
And again, thank you very much, Craig, for coming on today and explaining this whole process. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.